Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics. In this video we're going to talk about choosing a dot size for a pistol optic revisited. I'm no different than anybody else. I can have new experiences, I can evolve, I can learn new information and change my mind on topics that I was previously had a different opinion on. Now I'm not going a complete different direction on dot size. But if you look at the video I put out originally on this, I was predominantly a larger dot fan, and I did like the 325 as well. So you've got two really common dot sizes. You've got 6.5 MOA or somewhere in there, and then you've got the 325. That's specifically talking about Trijicon's offering because I am RMR centric. But there's other dots out there that float around in that neighborhood. One big departure, I guess slight departure from that, would be like the Delta Point Pro, which is like 2.5. But usually you don't see any dots smaller than that. Well, I'm here to tell you today that I am now a card-carrying member of the Church of the 1 MOA RMR. When I first started experimenting with optics on handguns, I liked the larger dot. And the conclusion that I came to is why I was a bigger fan of the larger versus the smaller dot is I had less exaggerated movement in my sight picture, which was comparable to the width of a front sight. So the 6.5 dot, the 6.5 RMR, is very comparable in projection, at least in appearance size, to the width of your average front sight. So that appealed to me because that's what I was used to for that natural movement in the sight. Now, with iron sights on a gun, there's natural movement there, but it's not as exaggerated because they exist on the same plane. And they tend to move in concert with our hand. Whereas when we get an optic, that dot seems to and does move independently of the natural movement of the hand. You've got movement in relation to the target, but you've also got that natural tremor in your grip, even with a supported position. But with traditional two-handed shooting, you're going to have a slight degree of movement in your dot. So that larger dot appeared to move less. And because it appeared to move less, it appealed to me more. It took me years and years and years and years and years. I wouldn't say that many years. That's a lot of years. Now that I think about it, I put too many in there. Let's say a couple years to really a few. Let's go with a few, because a couple can be 2, a few can be 3, as to all of them. It took me a few years to really start to develop my skill on the dot to a level to where I was comfortable going to a smaller dot. And of course the question is, why go to a smaller dot if you can shoot well with a 6.5? Because let's be honest, 6.5 MOA dot at 100 meters is just over 6 inches. So why would you go with a smaller dot if you can hit a man, if your dot is only covering 6 inches at 100 meters on a handgun? Well, we got to stop thinking about the dot like we would think about a front sight, because one of the advantages besides single focal plane shooting, target focused shooting, is the fact that now not only do I see above and beside my point of aim, I can also see underneath it. On iron sights, the direct left and right of my front sight post is blocked by my rear notch. I have to look outside the sights to see data to my left and to my right. Obviously I can see above it the same, but with a dot I get to see underneath my dot as well, which reveals even more of the target to me. And for self-defense purposes, I find that to be one of the best features besides the target focused feature of shooting with the red dot, and the fact that I can have someone at gunpoint and I get to see way more of my threat than I would normally see. If for whatever reason, based on distance or circumstance, my presentation with my sight picture is blocking their waistline or wherever their hands are, I've either got to depress my gun to a high ready to see that information, or I've got to increase or decrease my distance to get inside or outside of that visual envelope. With the red dot, I get to see underneath my point of aim. The other Sage instructor that I have, John Dufresne, he also teaches, he also owns Kinetic Consulting. So if you want to get into a class with John, you can either jump into a Sage class that he's teaching or one of his Kinetic Consulting classes. He's like, hey, you should try the 1 MOA again. And I'm like, oh no, I've tried it before. But I tried it years ago when I was still getting comfortable with the 6.5. I felt like it had so much exaggerated movement, I wasn't really comfortable with it. But John's a smart guy. So I was like, okay, you know what, I'll give it another shot. I still have a 1 MOA RMR, it's on a rifle. I'll go ahead and take it off the rifle, put it on a handgun, take it back out there, and see if I like it. And boy, did I. The 1 MOA on the pistol allows me to see almost complete totality of my window picture. The dot covers 1 MOA. So at 100 meters, it's covering an inch of my target. And again, we're talking about handguns. Obviously on a rifle, people like 1, 2 MOA points of aim. On a handgun, it may seem a little counterintuitive, but I'm still trying to see as much data as I possibly can. So with the handgun, my philosophy is it's not so much of an issue of covering up too much of the target at closer distances. It's an issue of being able to see more of the target at closer distances while being able to be more precise at all distances versus your 6.5, your 3.25, or somewhere in that neighborhood. Yes, the 1 MOA RMR is going to have more exaggerated, I should say 1 MOA dot, is going to have more exaggerated movement than you would see from a 3.25 or 6 or 9 or 12 or 14, so on, so forth, till the end of time. But the precision that I'm able to get is there. And once you become comfortable and you become competent on a larger dot, it seems to be a natural progression and a natural evolution to move down in dot size because you're used to that natural movement. You don't feel like it's exaggerated. You don't feel like you have like the caffeine shakes or anything like that, or you're having a seizure. You've identified the fact that that natural movement is always there, even though sometimes it can be worse than others. And once you've mastered dot presentation, picking up the dot and shooting with the handgun, shooting the dot on the handgun, that 1 MOA dot is going to give you more options than you'd get otherwise from a 3.25 or a 6.5. I've noticed considerable improvement on my accuracy at distance by time. If I'm using my shooting metrics, you know, time, distance, accuracy, I've got improvement across the board with that smaller dot because I mastered the 6.5. Well, I wouldn't say mastered. I became proficient with the 6.5. Then I became proficient with the 3.25. And now I'm becoming proficient with the 1 MOA. And because I've already dealt with those larger dot sizes and I've gotten used to that natural movement, making the transition down to the smallest point of aim available just seemed like a natural evolution. And I'm glad that I had someone around like John to say, no, go try it again. Just like with everything else, caveat emptor, buyer beware. If you're just getting into optics on pistols, I wouldn't recommend the 1 MOA. You can try it, but again, that's an expensive experiment. So if you know somebody who has one, shoot their gun first before you run out and buy one. My recommendation, and I'm seeing this a lot teaching more red dot instructor classes for law enforcement, because law enforcement agencies are quickly transitioning to pistol optics. It's not the future is here, it's happening. I've been teaching a lot of LA-specific red dot instructor classes, and one of the problems that they're going to have with transitioning is getting officers spun up on this system with a smaller amount of time because budgets are things, and you know, we don't have the time, generally speaking, to provide the amount of training that we should apply to any profession, not just law enforcement. So for a law enforcement, from a law enforcement perspective, my advice is always going to be have 2 dot sizes available to your officers for whatever manufacturer you go with. If you go with Trijicon, have the 6.5 or the 3.25 available for officers so they can pick one that they want to use. The 6.5 is going to get the work done, and it's going to be the easiest one to pick up, adapt to, and get good with. But it's not going to provide the same amount of precision or the same amount of data in a sight picture that you're going to be able to get from a 3.25. And then, of course, once you get really, really proficient, having the 1 MOA as an option for your really, really good shooters is definitely something that should be available to them. I can't shoot a 3.25 or a 6.5 as well as I can a 1 MOA. I brought 3 comparable guns out to the range and proved it to myself. And that's what made me be like, okay, from now on, my carry gun, my duty gun is getting a 1 MOA RMR. Of course, I'm going to keep the other ones, stay proficient with them. Still, I'm going to shoot them. So I want to be able to appreciate that differences and explain it from an instructor's point of view. But I guess the point of the video is be open-minded even when you've already developed proficiency with the system. I was really, really comfortable at that point with the 3.25, and then I tried the 1 MOA again, and it was like I was seeing it for the first time, literally, figuratively, pun intended, pun not intended, however you want to put that. So if you're already feeling really, really good about your 3.25 dot choices and you feel like you've reached a performance wall, it might be time to go down to a smaller dot size. If you're new to shooting, like I said, wouldn't necessarily recommend it off the bat. I won't say you can't do it. I will say that the learning curve is going to be there because you're just going to feel that natural movement of the gun more. You're going to notice it more because of the dot size. As a diagnostic tool, which is also very important, that nothing diagnoses your shooting better than a red dot. The 1 MOA is going to exaggerate those small mistakes. So even if you're proficient at a 3.25 and you step down to the 1 MOA, you're going to see those mistakes come back, which allows you to correct them. And it's not something you would necessarily be able to perceive shooting the 3.25 or shooting the 6.5. Those have more, I guess, forgiveness in movement and aberration than you're going to get it from the 1 MOA. So the 1 MOA is just going to take your skill level to the next level. So again, I think I pretty much covered all my advice on choosing dots. And this, of course, is an update because I wanted to update my own personal experience, but also to advocate for if you've already reached a high skill level on your 6.5, your 3.25, you might want to start moving down your dot size because 1 away is pretty damn awesome. I'm Aaron Count with Sage Dynamics. Train accordingly.